Hello. Hello, everyone. Lovely to see so many of your faces bright and early on a Friday. Welcome to the end of your week. A few of you are new faces, but for those who I have met and haven't, my name is Esther. I'm one of the step stewards, joined with John today, who's on this side of my screen, but maybe he's in other places for you. And today will be a bit more of a kind of classic old school step style discussion about a theme or a word. So not a ton of facilitation, but we'll start with our little bit of a ritual with the words. Yeah, John, right? And then I have a bit of a check-in question for us, which I might toss you into breakout groups for, and then we'll come back to chat through our ponderings. Anything to add, John? No? Feel good? Okay. Well, then I would love to read the words. It's been a moment since I've done so. And for those who are new, anybody here first stepper? Yeah. Hey, Maria, welcome. Lovely to have you with us.
Thanks so
We
much for
have,
having me.
of course, of course, of course. We have a bit of a tradition and a ritual of reading some kind of collective words that the John and Rob and Lizzie and Andy, who are some of our stewards, have crafted. They've also been added to and thought about over the months with others. But I'm going to read the version that I have up on my screen, so I'm not sure how up to date it is, but I will do it. Feel free if you want to close your eyes or to lean back, turn your cameras off. It lasts just a few moments. As we navigate these transitional times and traverse the emerging regenerative territory, we commonly find that there is not always an obvious path to follow. With many questions to navigate, yet no single answer to guide us, we look for the footprints of others to consider where we might take our next steps. However, even the most experienced travelers in these spaces would admit that they are continually finding their way, unsure of what is around the next bend or over the next peak. This is an ongoing dance with uncertainty, switching between action and inspiration, acting before we think too much, and thinking before we go too far. So, although taking the first or next step can often feel like the hardest, know that you are not walking alone. Whether or not your own trail will become a valuable path for others does not matter. We help each other towards a regenerative tomorrow, not as experts, but as parents, neighbors, colleagues, and citizens. All our stories are unique and all our voices are welcome. There are many paths up the same mountain. And with that, welcome to November 14th Steps. Also welcome Alex, who joined a little bit late. So I don't have the power to do so, but I would love to actually pop people into breakouts, maybe 3 per breakout. And this will be just a quick moment to check in with perhaps someone new or a familiar face. And I know that a few of you have already taken a peek into our Miro board. But if you also want to add your thoughts there in your checkout or check-in, feel very welcome to do so. The question is going to be, what is something, anything, that you've mended recently? And let's give maybe 7-8 minutes for that conversation. And then we'll see you back here and hear about all the things that you're mending. Go to a breakout room, even though I don't have anything to say.
Hello. The other room are clearly having too much fun.
I'm just looking up the glue.
Oh, yes. In context, or indeed
Stop.
outside context, going, we're just looking up the glue.
Yeah, we're talking glue specifics, very important.
What did you share, Alex?
Well, I basically got an old text and tried to understand it and fill in the blanks. I guess that was my maybe slightly strange take on repair.
No, I saw
Uh,
that on the Miro board. Looks fascinating.
yeah, it was really interesting. I sort of instinctively put that down and then spent about an hour trying to think how to explain it. It made sense when it went down, and then yeah. But yeah, so it was like I guess it was a combination of cultural understanding, and then trying to project or imagine what those holes in the text might be, and how to represent them. So it was a strange combination of kind of architecture and uh, kind of Indiana Jones thing, hunting for the missing relics or inventing the missing relics. Um, so yeah,
Well,
yourself?
yeah, sort of doing that's interesting because that's what that maps to something that Nat was talking about going. This is not the right piece, but it is a piece. It's like I don't have the right thing to do a thing, but this is my stopgap solution to kind of like to make that repair. Esther,
Yeah,
hello.
Hello. It sounds like there was rich conversations on both sides. Maybe I'll open it up here to share any reflections coming out of the breakout rooms, and something that was said in our breakouts that I would also love to pose to you all, that maybe you discovered in your conversation, would be, what are the skills of repair? Like, what skills does repair need? Because we talked a little bit about not having them, but I didn't poke in our breakout group, but I'm curious to investigate more if that's true. But yeah, would love to hear reflections.
I guess having a thorough understanding of the thing that is being repaired, how it's put together, um, and how you're going to integrate the repair into it. So I think maybe that's a very simplistic way of putting it, but I think that's your number one skill. Before you even get to the technical skills of the repair.
There's something in that that's dropped into my head of you go. It's the capacity to imagine what was and now what is, and then what might be, and whether the sort of like what are those three states. If those three states are continuous, then there's no need for repair. Because if the thing is the sort of like it is as it was, and it is as it will be. But if you look at something and go, this is not as it was. Now, does it become as it was again, but just renewed? Or are we sort of like making a different version? It's still a repair, but it's a kind of like you go, oh, we've dropped into ship of thesis, haven't we? Is it still the same thing if you repair it, but in a different way?
Mm.
I find it interesting how people respond to scars on their body, which somehow connects up Nat's bit about superglue being used for wounds, but the notion of, yeah, what you're saying, John, in that some people really don't like having scars, in my experience, which has always surprised me. Because I kind of find like, well, that's just a part of you. Once you've got a scar, it's part of your story and your life. And I remember being extremely surprised to first discover someone very close to me was very, very, um, felt the absolute opposite, would go to any lengths not to reveal or, yeah, so sort of repair. People have very different relationships with repair of the body.
I recently had hand surgery, and I've got a big scar here that you won't see on the camera.
And I was quite looking forward to having a good scar. And it's like, I mean, I wish I had some sort of more like really sort of powerful reason why I needed hand surgery, but it wasn't, it's not particularly cool. I'm not going to do it on a recorded say. But it leads to a big, quite badass scar on my hand. What I hadn't expected because when they warn you is that I have got more limited movement in it. So I now don't like the scar, not because of the scar, but because it's like I can feel it in the palm of my hand.
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, it's that. I mean, I've got work to do and stretch around it, but it's like it kind of looks a bit cool, but it's annoying. But I know what you mean about the aesthetic of repair. I mean, gets me to start thinking about ripped jeans, which I think I see them coming back. Anyway, whether they should or not, I'm not going to do it. But,
yeah, I think I was just thinking about what you were saying there, Christopher, because I broke my neck, but I don't have any scar of that, so people don't know. It's like having a story is sort of fun. But then I'm thinking about my mum, who's got quite a big scar on her face from cancer on her face, and she hates it. She, wish it wasn't there because it's uncomfortable, but it's also so. I think she feels it's disfiguring. So it's like is there I don't know. But yeah, this telling a story. Does it matter if you can't tell a story with the repair?
I do love that idea, the story around repair. So yeah, because it's vulnerable too, it's right there. So we're talking like physical manifestations of repair. They are things that can invite conversation. So you as the bearer of the mark, are you willing to share the story? Are people willing to listen to it? Can they engage with the story of repair? Does it represent healing for you? Does it represent a really traumatic moment in your life? So I can see the many reasons why it's almost like a co-creation, if it's a very physical sign of repair between you, the individual who experienced it, and the person who's just perceiving it out of time, out of context, and what happens when those two meet. It's also the idea of repair, if we think around regeneration, the idea of repair, reduce, and recycle. Do we see repair as a marker of scarcity or a certain kind of lack? Or do we see it as being wise stewards of resource? Do we see it as about, around agency, the fact that we have the ability, some of the skills to tell a brand new story for something that probably has more stories within it to tell? So yes, just the idea of story and narrative around repair. What are the beliefs we hold around it, both to the positive or the detriment? And what our culture generally thinks about having things last longer than they should, and letting things go away as well.
That really chimes with the story that Pins told us about the glue. And do you want to tell it, Pins?
I can try, and I'll try and refine the glue. I feel like I should have a picture of my neighbour David. This is some glue that my neighbour David gave me, except David has now been dead for 3 years, and the glue is still here. And he was my neighbour from when I moved into when he died. It's going to make me sad, which it shouldn't, because he wanted to go when he did. But he had been living here a long time, and we had quite a particular relationship. He was in his 70s, and he had lots of. He was not a storyteller, but he would slip in information about my local area, and he used to run the cafe in the park opposite where I live, and I know the other people who now run the cafe. It's on a lease from the council, and both of my kids worked in that cafe, and like lots of cafes in that sense, it's a hub. So David is living on through the number of items that have been fixed by David's glue and other tools of his that I have. And he was in my bubble during COVID. and had no children and basically no friends. Like, he's a classic case of extreme social loneliness. And my lodger is a mental health nurse, or was at that time, my friend Mary. And we did a lot of looking after David. So there's something in here about the things that were exchanged. Yeah. And H, he would be very much in the common trio of reduce, reuse, recycle, which to me is missing both refuse and repair, kind of interestingly. So I think if we think of the trio versus whatever the quinto would be, it's I think there's something in there too. And David's case, a sort of repair of relationship to the world, and that he was a proper hoarder. And I mean, as in, it took almost 18 months to sort through his dwelling after his departure. So there's lots of things entangled, as you would say, John, in the story of David Usher.
And it's even though that kind of perception of him being, as you described it, sort of like socially apart from the world and so on, but he was still a form of glue himself for other things, for stories, for introducing you to things in the area that you did not know about and whatever else and so on. And I think that really speaks to me as well. I think about sort of like the impact and the impact he's still having after departed.
Mm.
He'd appreciate this conversation, David.
Yeah.
He liked repairing things. So it's making me laugh, because it's like he liked people, he liked good things and he liked to fix them properly and was very good at that.
I think that's interesting, the psychology of people who want to fix, because sometimes it's a projection of not being seen in society. So if they want to repair things sometimes, but the compulsive repairers. Or I remember having a chat with someone at the scrap store in Birmingham, and she was like, the problem with us in this place is we see potential in everything. Like, actually, where's the managed decline, or the letting things decay? But we've come into this world where everything's plastic, so it doesn't decay. So it's psychologically not plastic that you can bend. We use it like that a lot of the time, don't we? Like neuroplasticity, but it just sticks around and it doesn't have a natural life cycle.
We heard a little bit in our group, maybe Chris, you're about to jump in on this, but just about this question of whether or not mending needs to be a natural process. And like, what happens if your tools, like glue, something that is not going to necessarily support a regenerative process in our environment, is really essential for gluing something together, or like fixing clothing, for example, and needing, wishing to darn socks but buying a zipper instead. This type of
it's the place where we can bemoan the existence of all this plastic, but the plastic exists, and it's what are we going to do about it? It's not going to go. The amount of plastic there is currently in the world isn't going to go anywhere. How can we reuse some of that plastic? And if in the reuse of some of it, as Lizzie asked me, did I need the fleece I bought off Vinted by a 90s brand I quite liked? Absolutely did not. I already had enough fleeces to keep me warm, and I know it's all made of. It's fundamentally, fleece is pre-prepared microplastic, right? It's just ready to be chopped, to be sliced into little bits. But yeah, I sort of repaired it with parts that then required ordering off Temu, and it's like, okay, this hasn't gone and been recycled. It is getting more use out of it, but the shipping of these little plastic parts to repair it comes with its own plastic wrapping, and it's just, where do we even, it's like. It's the challenge of, does one engage with what already exists, or just say, right, no, go away from it and go entirely to sort of natural materials, and that can I mean, I end up tying myself in knots on all this stuff. But there's definitely, and there was a question towards the end. I'm trying to remember. There was something, Maria dropped something right at the end. I can't remember what it was. It was. We were talking about whether or not I needed that fleece, and then Maria said something about need. That I started projecting that it was going to be about need versus want and desire and joy and things like that. But then the breakout room closed.
Yeah, I think we all panicked like deers in the headlights when we saw the countdown. There's so much to talk about. Yeah, I think that's the kind of the need versus want. I think the words that I used was to know that you don't need, but to get is a form of like a really hollow state. And that's something that I think I am experiencing a lot, but especially this time of year when you're seeing a lot of very pushy kind of messages and forms of communications that are specifically directed at that kind of part, which understands you don't need, but you could get. And I kind of find that it takes in center states and in certain kind of wherever you are in your day or kind of in your cycle, it really sometimes it's just almost an unconscious act of refusal, and sometimes it takes a lot of energy to kind of refuse and sit with that kind of moment immediately after or before you've kind of thought that impulse out. And yeah, I think the only way I would describe it is like it's a hollow state. Hi, Kat.
I was kind of detecting a sort of two types of repair, perhaps a kind of the scar on the hand, which is a reminder that something's still not quite right, and then there was repair as a form of transformation, a way of extending life. And I just, something sort of a little spark went off in my mind when you were talking about getting the things you don't need. I mean, I wonder if that's a form of repair. There's a hole in your life, and you get something to repair it, to somehow feel that you're extending or transforming your life. And yeah, maybe it's a fantasy, but I think maybe that's what's going on.
Painful. And as I hear that, there's a play recently at Soho Theatre in Walthamstow called Bogwitch, which was all about it's about a sort of one-woman show about leaving the city and going to sort of live on a regenerative farm in the south of England. And a core part of that is the hole. She talks about the hole inside her that is filled by online shopping. And what does she fill that with when she moves to the countryside and sort of starts darning her own socks and carrying a basket everywhere in order to, buying clothes from Toast. It's a very, very good play. I'm saying all this because it's over now, but yeah, when you started saying it, what's the hole? I suddenly felt, oh my God, I'm her. Or am I? I don't know.
Well, I was going to say in recovery circles, they call it the hole in the soul, and it's like you can fill it with shopping, drugs, sex, men, women. It's just a hole to be filled unless you have something outside of yourself, a sense of spiritual otherness, all that sort of thing, which is probably what we're lacking a bit as a general society.
Thank you for saying we, because I was just making sure it was all me. It was just me on this call.
Not you, not Jay.
That's my recovery.
I really like what you said, Alex, about it's almost the sense of prolonging or transforming or extending. Because I think the metaphor or the kind of the mental model of the hole and the emptiness, that's kind of very apt. But the problem that I always had with it is that it's very binary, because it's either you have a hole that you need to fill, or you have kind of something that you're full already, and you don't need any kind of you don't need any material things to kind of keep going, and you might as well just be a hermit and just like lock yourself to all of the other influences. And I find that kind of the state of feeling like you're getting something, the kind of gratification of that versus flip of the switch and now it's not gratifying anymore. It's like, how do you towing that state is an interesting one, because is it dependent on your kind of prerequisite state of determining whether something's going to bring you that sense of purpose, or is it determined by you maybe not being on that kind of, yeah, not predetermining what that's going to give you and what value are you going to receive from that thing.
There's something really interesting in there about how do I set my expectations for what the repair will be, or what the filling that thing will do. And maybe repair it helps lower expectations. You go, it's not going to be shiny, and it's not going to be new, and it's not going to be perfect, but it is going to be useful, or it is going to be sort of like, so suddenly you're going, it no longer has to be this massive jump to some perfect world, but you go, if I can move from the what is to the what might be in a way that creates more capacity for surprise when something really works. Like that talks back to Nat's talking about repair, when she was just like working out ways to fix a thing, and actually the kind of like the satisfaction in moving from that state of sort of like, well, this is what it is and it's broken, but now, oh, hang on, that Philip, that kind of like, oh, fix that. That's repair. It's not as it was. It's not as it was meant to be when originally designed, but it is now of purpose and of use again. And you know, you have that relationship then with the thing. You go, oh, I did that. I wonder what else I could repair.
Yeah, Christopher, with your fleece, how much more would you have paid if it had been repaired? Or did you get the value from thinking, I've done that? Even though you use Temu stuff.
You're muted. Chris, you're muted.
I really have outed myself by saying I buy my spare repair parts from Temu. I sort of do a bulk order of them. It all comes at once, and I've got a box full of spare repair parts that, anyway. I don't think I would have paid more for it. Actually, one of the things I find with some of this old stuff, and I'm a bit of a hoarder of things which have stories, and I sometimes see this stuff which is going, this is going on YouTube, and I'm slightly, I shouldn't be saying all this, but it's just I just like seeing that there's so much stuff that's been made in the last couple of hundred years, and that no one wants. I find this when I'm looking at old books. I have Penguin books, and from the first 100, about half of them are books no one wants to read any of it. And there's just these books, and it's okay, that's wood pulp, that's recyclable. But I sort of my heart gets slightly broken for these objects that have had such care and attention and so much effort put into making them. And so I sort of collect old things that have stories. So for this, I don't think I would have ever paid a lot of money for it. I wanted it partly because it was unloved and by a brand that I thought was amazing in the 1990s. Anyway, digging my own hole again.
I'd be curious. Thanks, Chris. We'll have to see this fleece by the end of the call, just FYI. I'm curious, and this is selfish, so if the conversation, we want to keep it here, happy to keep it. I'm interested in, a lot of this has been around the personal and the individual experience of repair and grappling with how do I repair and the intention to mend. But I think as repair kind of scales, for better or lack of a different word, I'm curious on, any reflections around like the collective. And I think H, you kind of referred a little bit to this with storytelling and also pins in terms of these individuals who can be the glue to a more collective experience. But curious if it's such an individual process, how does it move into a more collective one when we have things to repair together? There it is.
I do love that, Esther. And I do want to come back to that point because, someone said repair connection to planet, to connection to a larger sense. And I would almost say a cosmic sense. That's what the people, and that actually it is as much individual. I mean, we know this, the cliches are true, right? The microcosm links to the macrocosm. So that's why these local, individual, and communal acts of tending, caretaking, repair actually are reflective of a larger state of consciousness which seeks to caretake for things, but also a connection, whether we call it to spiritual, soulful, planetary, ecosystems. That relationship, it might even be actually a discovery. It may not even be repair, I think, which is interesting. We can repair things that we consciously notice are in need of some attention. But what do we do with the other narratives or physical manifestations of things that we're not currently sure are in need of tending to? And I think that's also the invitation. So if someone has a desire to repair a thing in their local environment, it could also be, regreening a space. John, you can speak to this as well, taking back agency from anonymous individuals who don't care for a particular area and repairing it so people who are actually in the space get to enjoy it. But that's like a really physical, obvious invitation. But if you go through that same green space, which is unloved, is being unnurtured, what is the call that invites someone to say, I too could repair this? And I think that's a state change. That's a consciousness change. That's the invitation to something bigger, is that actually I have a hand in this too, and not knowing where it will lead. So I'm intrigued as this question of this connection to self, knowing that we ourselves can do with some tuning up and refinement and repair, but extending that sense of self out to several degrees, that it becomes much bigger than you. And how do we invite that in? And part of that is the story we tell ourselves of I'm part of something much greater. And part of that is acting upon it too as well. So I think both thought and intention must inform action. And then the world responds in kind to you. And so you build a bigger narrative through that. So those are some reflections, but I love that repairing connection to a larger sense of self, or discovering it because perhaps no one told us that we have that.
Go on.
So as you asked that, Esther, I've realized one thing. Because repair means to fix, right? Repair means there's something that there's a state in which it should be, and how do you repair it? And I don't tend to use the word repair much. I tend to use the word maintain. And there's the state when you think of, say, a green space in a city, and you think, if one were to think of repairing it, the repairing of it, I was going to say the reparation, but that gets you into a whole other topic. The repairing of that green space is to get it back into the way that the humans wanted it to be, as opposed to maintaining it, which also is to some degree according to our own aesthetic, or because actually, does it actually need any maintenance? And I guess on the kind of collective, say, ritual of maintenance, we could call it repair. There's a thing I've done each year for the last few years, where a group of us go down to most of us come from London. We've had people come from further afield. People come from Oxford and Bristol. We go to rural Oxfordshire, and we go to the White Horse of Uffington, which is a 3,000-year-old chalk monument. It's a carving into a hillside. For those who don't know about it, there's lots of them all across that part of the country, but this is the only one that we actually know is ancient. A lot of them seem to have been made in more recent years after the maintenance ritual for the old one, where people would go and have these big parties to maintain it and then come home and think, do you know what? There's actually a timeline of like after each time they repaired it in the Victorian times, you can find someone went home and said, we should make one of those ourselves. And another town in the area gets a new, not quite as good white horse. It's carved into the side of this hillside. I've literally got a chart of those of like this is the year they maintained it. This is the year another village built the next one or made the next one. And it's this massive carving where the only way it's been there for 3,000 years, and we know it's been continuously, or maybe it's disappeared at times, but it's the overall shape has been nice, John. We know that it can't have been left unrepaired for longer than unmaintained for longer than 30 years, otherwise it would have disappeared or it would have lost the shape. And we also know that we haven't got a clue what it was there for originally. We don't know anything about the religious beliefs of the people that lived there 3,000 years ago. And we do know that the religious beliefs of the people who've lived there for most of the last 2,000 years would have been very different. And so whatever this horse was there for, people have kept it for some other, whatever reason. The reasons always change. All that's mattered is it's been maintained. And we now go down there and we treat that as a secular pilgrimage, as a sort of maintenance ritual. And it was interesting, as you spoke, Esther, and I suddenly thought, I hadn't really thought of that as repair. Because to me, repair tends to be to do with something human. To repair something is to repair a relationship. It's something to do with an idea of an ideal of how something should be. You can maintain something, you can keep it going, but repair has some kind of intentionality to it differently, maybe. Kyle, drop it in. What's the etymology of repair?
Yeah, I'll do that. What's that?
By dropping in, yes, tell us. I want to hear.
Can't believe John hasn't gotten us to that point yet.
Sorry, I can already hear Usher in the background playing.
Yeah.
But yeah, but it's an interesting because I think repair is like from Latin to say to make ready, which I quite like. But then there's apparently a verb version of repair, which is like to go to a place, especially in company or frequent habitual visiting of a place, which all sound like exactly what you were just talking about, Christopher. Like the idea of like visiting a place.
We must repair
so
to the drawing room.
Yeah, it's like return to one's country. So I quite like that as well. It's like kind of going back or return as well. But yeah, I'll drop in the chat as well.
With that description, it makes me think of like repairing your Bluetooth to your phone, like creating a new putting the connection in place again so that there is a connection.
That reconnecting thing is really interesting. You go, and it speaks a little bit to Alex's thing about going sort of like, I have these words and these images and so on, and I'm going to have to drop something in that reconnects the passage as a whole. To H's point about the rewilding thing, so there's a community orchard over there, which has been, there used to be an old friends group of the orchard that's aged out, and there's a group now sort of like trying to reconnect the community to it. And so I've just kind of like been supporting that in various different ways, but met a couple on a dog walk who talked, and we just got talking, as you do on dog walks. But they'd lived actually opposite it for 40 years. And it was like, oh, that's interesting. You're kind of like, you have more presence, more connection to this space. Can you tell us what you know about this space? Because the more we find the stories of people who've been around this thing for a while, the more, my gut feeling is, the more we have a chance of sort of like making people go, oh, we are connected to this because we now live there, as opposed to the people who used to live there, etc. But it's ours. It's like we can work on this green space, this orchard, the sort of like, prune the trees, collect the fruits, clear the grass underneath. But actually, there's part of me that goes to sort of like, it's just an excuse to get connected to people.
We have only a couple of minutes left. Are there any kind of I will have to leave on the hour in classic steps form if you want to stick around. You're welcome to. Before I do all of my wrap ups and sharing, yeah, any final burning thoughts?
I was going to say, perhaps the thing that connects the small to the large scale are stories. I think these repairs are quite often driven by story. I mean, my little bit was the most extravagant. I was trying to understand a lost civilization's relation to the cosmos. But that could equally apply to how you repair a building. What is the client's story? What are they trying to do? How do I enhance or transform their story and how they inhabit that space? So, yeah, I think story is a good medium for understanding the meaning and success of a repair.
Alex? Thanks, Pins. Stories as a glue. Beautiful. Well, I really appreciate everyone's beautiful thoughts. I kind of tried to actually capture a lot of what was being said. If you're not in the mural board, you'll see there's lots of stickiness. So if there's anything that you want to follow up on or continue, bring it to the chat on WhatsApp. I'm happy to continue the conversation there. But this has been super beautiful. I feel very grateful. Any final words from your side, John?
No, apart from thank you, Esther, thank you all. This has been, Esther and I were talking about this before we started. The Friday morning ones are good ones. We like the Friday mornings. It just feels like a way to start a day. But thank you all. We'll be back in December, subject to TBC. But again, thank you.
Bye all. Happy Friday. Good weekends when they come.
I was just thinking that. Bye, everybody.